Hey there, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andrew Clark, and in today's video, I want to talk about something that is going to totally change the way that you look at the guitar. And the reason for this is, if you imagine something like the piano, right? All the notes are laid out in a row, ascending or descending in a totally linear fashion. But on the guitar, a lot of times we think more vertically. So when we play a scale, that scale is traveling up and down the strings rather than up and down the frets. Now, this ability to play vertically gives us a lot of advantages, but I feel like it also holds us back a little bit. It traps us inside the box. So what I'll be doing in this lesson is showing you how to start playing and thinking horizontally rather than always vertically. And the goal here is to combine your ability to do both to eventually be able to cover the entire fretboard. So there isn't actually too much that you need to know to get into what we're going to talk about today, but I'd highly recommend checking out my video on the major scale. It's very simple, very beginner friendly. And then I'd also suggest checking out my video on building a home bass. A lot of this stuff that we're going to be doing is going to be stemming from that concept and that idea. And all I teach there is basically how to build a movable shape that's very simple and very home-like that you can always fall back on depending on what key you're in. But I really suggest watching that video first, even if you just watch the first little bit just to understand the concept. Okay, so as you know, when you play inside of a key, that key contains the 7 notes of its corresponding major scale. So when we play in the key of C major, well, we're gonna be playing all the notes from the C major scale. The same thing would go for its relative minor key. So A minor, in the case of C major, is the relative minor key of C major. And all we're doing there is it's containing the exact same notes. We're just starting it on the 6th scale degree. So if we have a C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, before returning back to C, and we started that on the A instead, but kept all the same notes, which is the 6th note of that scale, then we'd be playing an A minor scale or playing in the key of A minor. All that means the key of C major, the key of A minor are the exact same key. So for example, the most common scale that you're gonna start playing when it comes to improvising and stuff like that, and what the whole home bass concept is based on, is the minor pentatonic scale shape one, the traditional one that everyone knows. So it looks like this. And then all we're doing is we're adding in the notes that we actually took out from turning it into a pentatonic scale. Pentatonic means 5 notes. So we were removing 2 of the notes from the major minor scale. Like I said, I'm going over this really fast. This is all covered in the home bass video and in that major scale video that I was talking about. So they'll be linked below. Make sure you check those out first if you're not really able to keep up. But we would add those notes back in. So our 5-note scale, we turn it back into a 7-note scale. So now it would look like this. And what that basically does is it gives us all of our diatonic, so the notes that exist naturally in the key, all the notes of the C major scale, all in one nice little convenient shape. Now, if you remember back to the major scale formula, I usually teach it as a phone number. So in Canada and the US, I'm not sure if you guys do this anywhere else, but we do our phone numbers where it's like 3 digits followed by 4 digits. So I like to use 221-2221, like a phone number, to remember the major scale formula. And if I started on a C note in that scale, so there's a couple places, there's actually a few places where the C note is. So it's here, that's a C, that's a C, and that's a C. We're gonna use this one right on the G string. So right here, again, it's inside that nice and comfortable A minor / C major, pentatonic / major / minor scale shape. It's all the same, right? Right inside there, that note. And what we could do is we could do the 2-2-1-2-2-2-1 thing, right? So if we went from here, we'd go 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. And we just climb up 12 frets. And I mean, obviously, if you understand how the guitar works, we would actually be obviously completing an octave, but that same shape that's right here on the 5th fret is identical to what we have here on the 17th fret. So they're the exact same scale, everything's the same. However, what we were able to do is instead of going up the scale like this, from C to C, we can go like this. And that right there is your very first step to thinking horizontally. Now, this might not seem that interesting or that cool yet, or maybe not that useful yet, but the idea is it's going to give you a start. So what happens is as you're moving up that scale, that C major scale on the one string, you're actually passing through all the other shapes that are connected. So in my home-based lesson, I teach the shape that's kind of down below that position 1, and the shape that's right above that position 1. So as you're traveling horizontally up that G string, you're passing through at least that second shape, and then there's shapes connected all the way up. I don't want to go over all of them because this will take forever. I will cover all of them in another lesson. If that's something you guys want, make sure you let me know in the comments. But the idea is that as I'm moving up, it's actually doing the job for me. It's essentially bridging together all those other shapes. And as you get more and more comfortable just traveling up that one string, you're gonna start recognizing and finding little markers of, oh, hey, if I stop at this point in the scale, I'm sitting right over top of this other pentatonic or major minor scale shape that I already know. The first step of this is what we basically did, which is going from this position 1 all the way up to position 1 again, all the way up 12 frets up, all the way at the 17th fret. So that's just gonna get you kind of started off on the right foot. Now, if you've seen my video on chord roadmaps, actually I cover it in so many videos because it's such an important concept to grasp, especially when it comes to playing in other keys. Essentially what we're doing with those chord roadmaps is learning to play horizontally. All we're doing is putting those horizontal scales on our E and our A string, right? So if you think back to both of the chord roadmaps, you'll know the whole idea is we're covering the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chords, right? We number our chords and we're able to identify where those chords are based on those roadmaps. Well, all we're doing there is we're just playing a major scale up and down on the E and the A strings. And I've essentially covered this in the how to play between chord changes video that I've done as well. I know I'm referencing a lot of videos. I'll be sure to link them all below so that if you kind of want to dive a little bit deeper or you haven't seen those videos yet, you can watch them because they do give this a little bit more context. But the idea there is that you're using those low strings and playing horizontally rather than thinking purely in vertical scales. So obviously what we've done so far is not the most exciting, right? All we're doing is we're playing one scale, then playing up the major scale on one string, and just playing the same scale up an octave. But where it kind of starts to get a little bit more interesting is when we jump up onto a different string. So in this lesson, we're going to focus on using the B string. Again, this could be done on every single string, but I don't want to overwhelm you. But I love to use the G and the B string mostly when I am going to play horizontally. So if we were to start on the B string in our same scale shape, well, we would not be starting on a C note, right? We're starting at a different point in the scale. So for example, C, D, E. So if I were to start on the B string in the shape, I'd be starting on an E note. Now, if I just play the same notes from the C major scale, it's not really going to matter where I start or stop. These notes are all allowed, right? But the pattern's going to look a little different. It's not going to be 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1 from that point in the scale because we've already gone 2, 2, technically. This distance, again, is 2. So what that means is then we go 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2. So it's a little bit different. I don't want you to memorize necessarily like this pattern starting on every single note. It's probably just better to start kind of recognizing it using your ears. So again, what this is doing for us is this is climbing us up through the other shapes that we can use to improvise. Now, Again, I'm not going to show you everything that these shapes contain, because if you pair this up with like my home bass lesson, it's going to use this as kind of like connection points between your extended home bass and the thing that I like to call like outposts, these other shapes that are very easy to remember. These are going to serve as really nice horizontal ways to kind of move between and travel between those shapes. And eventually, as you do this more, this is going to actually allow you to fill everything out, right? Because like I said, there's shapes that just continuously connect all the way up the fretboard. So if I'm playing in this position, well, you can see that being able to move up those strings when I choose to is allowing me to put my hand in a new position to play a different scale, which is just going to kind of have a very different feel. Even though I'm playing the same 7 notes, just in different ways, they're all going to kind of allow me to access different melodies more easily. And we can continue to flesh this out by also going backwards. Remember, we don't need to be starting on our C note. For example, if we're improvising a solo in the key of C major, well, we're not going to be starting every single thing we play on a C note, right? That would sound ridiculous. But I'm going to play just a random chord progression. Right? If I'm playing that, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to climb up the scale like that, right? But I can start on a different note, and I can use this as a way to bridge myself into other scales, or even play a melody on one string alone. So. Just kind of a rough example of what you can start playing around with. And because of this, you can descend on these strings as well. So from here, instead of going, you can go same notes, right? And even the same thing on the G string. And this is where things start to get really interesting, because typically, if you were going to play a lick, let's do something super simple, and I'm going to go. Right? Something very simple. Well, normally, you'd have to travel up the strings to play that, right? But now, technically what you can do is you can go. Just like that, they have a slightly different feel, but also you're starting to actually understand the fretboard a whole lot better. And the actual application of this is very important, because in my opinion, when you travel up and down one string, your melodies become a little more voice-like. A really good example of this is Derek Trucks, one of my favorite guitar players ever. I'm a terrible slide player. It's something that I definitely need to work on. But you'll notice a lot of the stuff that he plays is on one string, because it has a very particular quality when you play a melody on that one string. And even if you're not into slide or playing slide, we can definitely take something from that, right? And instead of playing up and down vertically our scales, and we get that traditional kind of bluesy sound, instead we can play. You can probably tell that has a very different quality than me playing the exact same scale. Right, I'm playing a slightly different melody, but you get the idea. but there's a totally different thing going on there. And the idea is you combine them. You mix them all together and have them all in your tool belt at one time, so that when you are crafting a solo, whether that be improvising or you're pre-writing something or coming up with a lick or whatever you're doing, you now have access to be able to play the same thing vertically and horizontally because they have a different thing going on. When you take this concept and you combine it with the chord roadmaps and the home bass, and you mix it all together, you really are at a point where you've basically unlocked the entire fretboard. You're able to travel all the way around, you know all the notes that you're allowed to play. Specifically diatonically, right? We can get into more complicated stuff down the road, but really when it comes to unlocking the fretboard and when you're starting out, it's important to know how to play everything diatonically first. This even ties itself right into the cage system too, right? Because as you travel up and down the fretboard horizontally, you're covering those different C, A, G, E, and D shapes as you move up and down the strings. So if you want to learn how to connect that, if you go watch my lesson on cage, you'll see just how this fits right over top of everything there as well. Now, what changes if we want to play in a different key altogether? Literally nothing. Just like most other things on the guitar, it just comes down to shifting everything up or down the fretboard. So like I said, the home bass concept is really important here because that's where a lot of this is rooted from. But if I take that shape and I put it in a different spot, let's play in the key of E major. It's a very common key for people to play in. So the position now would be up here. Well, all of those patterns off my G and my B string are going to be the same. Now, obviously, we're so high up, we're probably not going to be completing the octave, but that's okay because there's all these other shapes along the way, and there's a lot more room to go backwards now. So while I'm up here, there's now all this space below, and there are shapes below there as well. Again, this is just giving you a way to access those a lot more easily. And when you listen to your favorite guitar players play, most of the time, now there are some exceptions to this, they are traveling between these different shapes, right? Because it's gonna give less of a static kind of boxy feel to what they're playing. And all they're doing is they're implementing this whole idea and concept all over the fretboard on all the other strings. So I'd really recommend, as a way to kind of practice this and apply this into your own playing, to challenge yourself and say, okay, I'm gonna put on a jam track. It's in the key of C major, A minor, or whatever key, it doesn't matter. Like I said, everything just shifts, and work on improvising a solo and playing some sort of nice melody only on one string. And you can jump around. You can do this for a little bit and then go back to regular, where you're playing in scale shapes you know, and then try the other string and just work on coming up with things that sound good. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover in this video. This should just take you one step closer to being able to understand the entire instrument, which is essentially the goal of this channel, right? Is to try and take music theory and these complicated ideas and make it something that you can actually understand and apply and start actually playing and making music with. I'll just reiterate, I'm gonna have a bunch of lessons linked below that I referenced throughout this video, and they're gonna be really important for you to make sure you check out if you haven't already. They're really gonna help kind of drive a lot of these points home. I don't really talk about it too often, but I do have a Patreon page where I post exclusive lessons and some extra content and things like that. So if you want to help support the channel, I'll be sure to have that linked below in the description. And very recently, I also launched a YouTube membership, which is essentially going to be the same thing as the Patreon, but it's on the YouTube platform. If you want to check that out, there is a join button right below the video player you're watching right now, next to the subscribe button. It's just a few dollars, and it goes a really long way in helping support me here on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and please also consider subscribing to the channel here as well. I upload a new guitar video just like this one every single week. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.